Say you've got a particular area or subject matter of interest. It's an area where you think there might be opportunities to do business, but you just haven't identified what that business might be. How do you take things forward to discover where the opportunities lie? Well, in the case of today's guest, he started a podcast. I'm Jeremy Klein, and this is Change Work Life. Hello and welcome to Change Work Life, the podcast that's all about beating the Sunday evening blues and enjoying Mondays again. My guest this week is Elvis Metrins, who is the host of the Startup Playground podcast, which steps into the shoes of real-life startup founders to talk about their successes and their failures. Elvis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for inviting me. It's a huge pleasure to be on another podcast. I think it's the third time I'm attending some, so I'm looking forward.
Fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit more about your podcast? So what it's about, who it's for, and also why you started it?
Basically, the main reason why I started my podcast was because I wanted to understand the entrepreneur mind. And basically, there are three reasons why I started actually going into podcasting. Is first of all, when I used to study marketing and sales and a little social media, but that was more like a sprinkles on top of all the marketing grade. I wanted to know what is podcast, but none of the teachers told me ever like what is podcast, because that was kind of a new medium in that time, even though I graduated around 2.5 years ago. Yeah, and I had a friend who was listening all the time to podcasts, and I found podcast actually very interesting medium because we humans possess something very valuable that not a lot of us uses is our voice. And actually another thing I think it's very valuable is our story, since that can impact a lot of people's lives. And in case we have something on our chest, we can also clean off it or maybe share with somebody, and then we can get one step closer to our goal or one step further in our journey. And another reason why I started basically a podcast about entrepreneurs and startups was because not only I wanted to understand the entrepreneurial mind, but I want to understand why a lot of startups and basically businesses fail, and why there is this ratio of 97% of startups kind of fail and 3 only succeed, and what makes one win, another fail in that case. Yeah, there were the main reasons for me starting actually this type of podcast.
What led you to that topic, this desire to understand why so many startups fail and why only a few succeed?
Basically, because we live in this unique age when, entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs is not a new term, but they start growing like many years ago, but they start evolving more with like the first computers and first things that came along, like first laptops and TVs and all those kind of things, and like Tesla cars and everything. And I wanted to understand what does it actually entrepreneurship means, because I have seen a lot of people on their Instagrams and Facebooks and social media having a status that they're entrepreneurs. But when you look deeper in their profiles, it doesn't seem like they're creating any impact. Basically, there were the main reasons for that start.
Turning to your own personal situation, now I know we're recording this, we're still in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I know that you were working in hospitality. I mean, is that something that you've stopped working in just because of the pandemic and hospitality as an industry has really, really suffered? Or is it something that you kind of say, no, I've now left hospitality and I've left it for good?
Mainly the reason why I left hospitality because I didn't feel any competencies anymore in what I do. It's most like my job was more like I'm doing like autopilot. I'm just going to work, doing stuff that I kind of not love doing. Hanging out with people and talking, it's something I do and I enjoy talking because that's why I do podcasts. But basically, if you do the same things over and over and over and over, and it doesn't help you to grow professionally and personally, for me personally, it's felt like if I'm doing over 10 years being in a different hotels around the world, Latvia and Turkey and some other places, and also Denmark the most, I realized that that's not something I want to be, because that's not where my passion actually lies. Because my passion lies more into creating something more creative. And back when I was also studying not studying, but working in the hotels, my manager gave me an option to work in a kitchen. And kitchen, comparatively to being a waiter, it's a little bit more creative because you can do like a plating and different ways how to make foods and different. So you can use a little creativity in it, but it still limits your options. And I always was striving for something more creative. And then I always was like, the first time I saw actually like iMac and I saw all these like creative things and Photoshop and everything, it got me into this creative because I want to understand how to create these kind of banners, how to create this kind of like different kind of layouts, templates, and those kind of things. So that led me to moving into more a creative industry rather than being stuck in a place where I don't feel growth.
Okay, so having left the hospitality industry, what do you say to people when they ask what you do now? Do you have a sort of a now I do this, an alternative career, or is it something that you're still exploring?
Basically, what I'm trying to tell to people that currently my purpose is to understand the entrepreneurial mindset and to encourage and both educate young entrepreneurs and everybody with the business mentality to reach out and follow their passion and dreams for like better world. Better is too vague to say because we can only impact it. We cannot change the world. And also I kind of chase for stories because back many years ago when I was in car accident, I lost a lot of my life story. And then I start realizing how important our story actually is, how important is our memories and how important is to share them and how important is to cherish them. When I'm trying to answer what I do right now is that I'm keep looking for my path and journey or journey and path. So basically I'm still on my path to something better than I had before.
And so was the podcast kind of the first step on that journey?
I started in the podcasting because I understood uniqueness in voice and stories and understanding and sharing and all those kind of things. But also now I got into like a little event management, which is also that in a couple of days, I partner up with a startup called Hi Right Now, and they are making one-on-one video conversation speed networking type of events. And for that reason, I also partner up with them because I want other entrepreneurs and startups and businesses help to grow their network and grow their community because nothing in life, I believe, is made by one person. This term of self-made man is too vague because there's always somebody who helps somebody. Maybe there are unique people who achieve alone everything in life, but usually by great leaders, there's some also supporters and community that kind of helps them to reach the goals. So that's, I think it's important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at any of the really successful people in the world at the moment, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Jeff Bezoses, they wouldn't be there were it not for their team and their executives and the people that they worked with when they were just starting out. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And also, it's not just that you can't do everything, but you're not necessarily good at everything. So you need to work with people who are good at what you're not good at so you can concentrate on what you're good at yourself.
Exactly.
How did you get introduced to this company that you're working with and how did you come to work with them?
Basically, back when I started podcasting, which was around, I think the first episode released, it was April 2019. And I started doing podcasting, like attending people and going to their headquarters and going to their incubators and private spaces and places where people feel comfortable. So I was referring myself to like being a remote podcaster that always had all the equipment in the back. And then we reached Corona. And then I realized that for me to actually still stay in a business or still be on the peak of the iceberg or at least be visible among your peers and your people who does the same things and actually in the business environment and entrepreneurial landscape is I have to go against my biggest challenges or my fear is actually being in front of the camera because I feel kind of weird being in front of the camera because you're looking at yourself and I don't know what is it. It's hard for me to explain, but maybe Jeremy, you have heard that before.
Yeah, well, I find it can be hard enough listening to myself, let alone seeing myself on video.
Yeah. And it's also, that's another thing that I also did the same when I first started recording myself and then listening to my voice and listening on like all the platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all other places where we host our podcast is also the voice seemed very weird. But then I realized that this is my voice. I'm born with it. This is my face. I'm born with it. And the best I can do is just to overcome their fear for a better good. And then I was thinking, okay, so I'm gonna start doing like YouTube podcasts and all those kind of things, like video podcasts. And I invested in some kind of video equipment. And then one day I was going through my emails, and then I saw that there was a message or a mail from a guy called Stephen Choi, which is the CEO and co-founder of Hi Right Now. And he was saying that, hey, I'm listening to your podcast and I'm a fan and everything, and I like your vibe and everything. And then I thought, like, why not to try new services? Because this service sounds very interesting when we are talking about Hi Right Now. And then one thing led to another one. And then I realized that we humans have to cherish the connections, because I think that a lot of people during this time of period, during this pandemic and during these lockdowns, have realized how important is human connection, like physical connection. And even though talking to people or meeting strangers, that's kind of, for me as a person in a creative industry, that uplifts me. And I wanted to try that Hi Right Now service. That's what they claim is expand your professional network via quick one-on-one video conversations. And what is unique about them, because it's not like they are the only ones who does something like that, but the way they do it is super simple, super randomized, and you don't know who you're going to meet. And you always have a good time because you always meet new people. And that was also an opportunity for me to reach people, audiences, and create followers in another side of the world, like the USA, the West Coast and East Coast and Asia and Australia and everybody else. And yeah, and then I just became their biggest fan or supporter, or how they refer myself is Hi Ambassador, meaning Hi Right Now ambassador. So yeah.
So how did you come from that position where you were sort of using their services to come to work with them and to organize their events and that sort of thing?
No, I mean, I'm not organizing their events. It's just I'm organizing events through their platform, because everybody can make an event in their platform. And I just found that services. And because before the Corona, I wanted to do my own event, and I organized like a venue, and I had an event team that was helping me, and we were reaching out to sponsors and reaching out to like keynote speakers and creating the whole theme and inviting people. And then one day that Corona came, and then I could not. And so basically everything that I invested in those couple months on organizing an event to gather people and help them increase their community and network, actually tell more about the uniqueness and what Startup Playground podcast does, is the thing that I'm founder of. And then, yeah, everything got cut off and we were not allowed to meet each other. So I had to think through how to recreate the same event experiences without us actually meeting in person. We meet through internet. So I referred that as a new normal. If maybe you have heard somewhere also, Jeremy, that.
So what the events that you're organizing through this platform, so who are they for and who's attending these?
Events that I'm organizing is basically for entrepreneurs. And the thing that I'm trying to achieve with this is basically for people who feel stuck, not being able to basically form genuine professional and personal connections, or they maybe just wants to take their passion to the next level. So I'm giving them option or a pool of people to meet and share their vision and increase their network and just share further the vision or the enjoyment I have got from Hi Right Now service or platform using it. So basically, event is for everybody who is an entrepreneur, who wants to become an entrepreneur, who just has passion for something and he wants to turn his passion for, let's say, cut into career. If we look back, then you know that the best businesses or the most enjoyable businesses that people have is the one that have passion for it, because then it doesn't feel like job actually.
And have you had any of these events so far, or are you still in the planning stage as regards these?
No, this is basically the first event that I'm making through like Hi Right Now. So it's going to be first event. And right now I'm of course not reaching the audience or the people attending that I would love to. Now I have to think as an entrepreneur outside box how to get people attend, because maybe people don't want to attend something that they haven't tested before, because they need to be a first followers or first supporters. That kind of shares away a uniqueness or the vision of the whole event.
Is this intended to be a paid for event?
No, it's completely free.
Okay.
Free of charge.
Where will this lead you, do you hope? I mean, let's say, you get some people to come along. What's, in terms of your own entrepreneurial ambitions and ideas and things, where are you hoping that this might lead you?
Where I'm basically hoping is for people to, what I'm hoping to achieve with this event is basically to help others, as I mentioned, to increase their network and community, and also help me increase their community and also get some followers behind it. Because with each product there, as I mentioned before, it needs some kind of followers who support and, say like, oh, it's good. But with the vast amount of podcasts and shows and the content available currently, it's hard to stand out among all the big giants, mentioning like the same Joe Rogan, who is the number one podcast in the world currently, I believe. Sometimes like little people or little like me, a little podcaster, have to think outside box how to actually reach those hundreds and hundreds of listeners, because the podcasts have seen like growth, but I would love to have a bigger growth and actually showing that also like the brands, not unwell-known brands, also have to have a voice and also have to have their story heard. So my intentions in this event is not for me to create a popularity or reputation, but more help others and sharing this principle of give-take.
This sounds as an idea. I mean, getting entrepreneurs together to network, to tell each other their sort of stories and struggles and all that sort of thing. That's a great idea. I'm curious as to where it might go in terms of being a business for you. Now, because I don't know anything about your circumstances, but and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that you're at some point going to want to have something which generates an income, pays the bills, that sort of thing.
I mean, monetization, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Of course. Eventually, of course, I would love to. But for this last year and this year, probably yet not. So I'm thinking how to create this kind of monetization without looking kind of greedy, because I don't want to create this image about myself that I just want to monetize on people's wallets or something. I want to provide value and them feel like they would love to invest or sponsor or share or donate into what I do. So basically them believing and sharing my vision through like good marketing, let's say. So in terms of me leading, I'm thinking maybe in the future do like a merchandise, or maybe also I'm thinking about like writing a book, because of the vast amount of knowledges that I have generated over all these podcasts. I was thinking, and also a lot of entrepreneurs and business people that's also older and more in a bigger seniority level in a business environment have also suggested that why I don't like write a book or make an audiobook for people to actually soak up. Because as my grandma used to say, that we always learn and we never stop learning in our life. And our whole life is a journey of actually learning new things, and you never stop learning. So I think that, the knowledge that I own and the data I have collected, I mean, I don't want to refer to the data because then it sounds I don't like data words in generally, but basically taking what I have learned and through values and learnings and knowledges generated, I would love to others to also learn and grow professionally and personally. So the way when I'm thinking about selling is, through knowledge, audiobooks, merchandise, books, those kind of things.
Okay. Courses? Is that something you might move into?
I was also thinking about, because a lot of people, like I'm currently in a move to like from Copenhagen to Riga, I'm moving back to my home country. And I was thinking that because podcast is such a news medium, and I have spoken to a lot of business people who would love to start their own podcast. And I was thinking, like, since I have generated some kind of knowledge over those couple of years that I'm doing podcasts and investing in audio engineering and all those kind of things and learning all that stuff, I was thinking why I can't also do a podcast consultancy, which I have done for a test run with some of my close friends and partners and everything. And I thought that could be one of the ways how to generate income, is to share away a knowledge through these kind of podcast consultancy of how to start your own podcast. But then there are already podcasters doing so. So I would have to think about something else that adds additional value to that I'm also doing consultancy for them.
Well, I think if you're planning on doing it in your native Latvia and you are from Latvia yourself and so understand the language, culture, all that sort of thing, I would have thought that would give you quite a head start in terms of podcast consultancy, just being able to speak their language.
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, I was thinking, but I have to, because when I'm speaking to my friends in Latvia, not everybody's listening to podcasts, and a lot of elderly people, like my parents and my girlfriend's parents and cousins and everything, some of them doesn't still know what is podcast. They know that it's an audio thing, but some of them doesn't know how to access those things. Because a couple of years ago, or is it still, I'm not sure it's happening, because when I first was hopping on a podcasts, a lot of iOS users said that they didn't even know that they have an Apple podcast app, like an app that's referred to the podcasts. So it wasn't probably marketed enough for people to know it. So I was thinking like maybe to popularize actually podcasts, because for me to provide valuable knowledge, I need to actually show the value in podcast, I believe, for people to actually pay me for it. And as it's a new service, generally, kind of, then, you get it.
But to me, that looks like a huge opportunity, actually, because it's like many things. It's one of these things that's boomed in the US. Here in the UK, just in the past, I don't know, couple of years or so, podcasting has really boomed, and the number of people who've got their own podcasts has increased dramatically, even more so as we've been through lockdown. You're seeing quite a few new podcasts here in the UK starting, and it strikes me as a medium that'll just spread. There will be people in Latvia who understand that this is something which is already big in other countries. It's growing in lots of other countries. It'll reach all parts of the world in the same way as basically radio and TV did, I would have thought.
I do so too. But I think one of the biggest podcasts, if I'm not mistaken right now, Jeremy, is in London, is London Real. You must have heard about it.
I don't think I have, actually. I might have to look that one up.
Yeah, because I think that he also does a consultancy, and he have done a lot of big names on his podcasts. And I think it's one of the biggest ones in UK, London Real, something like that. You should check it out.
Yeah, I will do. I'll look that one up. And what about on the community aspect? Because networking circles for entrepreneurs, I mean, that's definitely something that people do pay for. I had a few weeks ago a chap who, I don't know if you're aware of Business Networking International. It's basically a very large networking organization for businesses. And the chap, Charlie Lawson, who runs the UK of BNI, Business Networking International, was a guest on the podcast a little while ago. So, that's an example of one networking organization which brings entrepreneurs together so that they can take advantage of mutual opportunities. And there's lots of other online entrepreneur networks. Is this something also that you can tap into as you're already starting down that road?
Jeremy, there's a lot of things we can start, but I don't know how it's in UK, but in Europe, recently Denmark being cut off a lot of places. If I'm going to go back to Latvia right now, I will have to sit in quarantine for 2 weeks because of the high risk of infectious people of the corona and everything. So it's hard to think because, last couple months, things have gotten better and summer is less felt for corona, but still we live in this life or a world of uncertainty. And I have thought about it. I'll be honest with you. I have thought about actually making these kind of networking events, but then if I don't know how many people I have gathered and I have to worry about everybody's health and, all those kind of things, it's not say an extra work, but it's an extra unnecessary hustle to think about it. So right now, I'm thinking about actually like having these kind of online events. And when the situations gets better and we actually will be able to gather people together in a venue, like a locked venue, then I will definitely pursue with that idea.
It was actually the online events that I had in mind. I don't see why that's something that couldn't also be something that's a business that you charge for. There's various online communities out there, online communities for entrepreneurs, which have a membership fee. It's the fee for getting into this closed community, getting to tap the brains of the founder and that sort of thing. So that was actually the direction I was going. I mean, I completely agree with you that hopefully there will be a place for in-person networking before too long. But it was the online was where I was heading just at that moment.
Yeah, the thing that I'm not sure is like how comfortable people are actually being in this type of events. Because I have also saw in a past events of like Hi Right Now, everything that in the beginning is a huge hype because it's something new. And when people start realizing that it is what it is, then people, maybe not everybody comes to it. Or maybe I think that this new type of like video events, like webinars, of course, is not new thing, but this type of new events, it's different. That's something new that we may not have experienced before. At least I haven't experienced before. Or maybe it's just being around and I have been living under the rock. So that's another option. But yeah, I mean, I think, and I'd love to, that if these events that I'm actually making, which name is Your Entrepreneur Playground, which is closely connected to Startup Playground podcast, is that I would love to create this kind of community where people gather together and share their ideas, feel like comfortable, feel like home, because every great company and organization needs a community.
So if we were to fast forward a year from now, what would you hope to be able to say in terms of what your podcast, what your own entrepreneurial journey, what your business looks like at that point?
A year from now, I'd love to actually be that I've reached episode number 50, that I would be released some kind of audiobook or something, because every time when I'm reached some kind of a number or a particular number, like number 10 or 20 or 30 or something, I usually try to make some kind of idea, cherish these small goals. So my goal and what I see in a year, that I would think that I would at least develop a decent base of listeners and followers. So not at least maybe like 10,000 downloads for a whole podcast or something like that, which is a bit far currently, because I think I'm at around 3,000 downloads of 37 episodes. So yeah. And I would love to create like maybe some kind of incubator for startups that's also does these kind of marketing services, or make like a marketing agency that focuses on podcasting, but also offers different kind of other services like social media and event management and merchandise maybe, or something like that. Initially evolve on podcasting and using voice as a main thing, and then going into like other marketing services. Another thing that I was thinking about, and also it's a new thing, is to actually have your own radio show, like a morning radio show or something. That's kind of like a business type of talk or something, because radio, I think, have lost some kind of value in our listener base in generally, because of all the Spotify and everything, this new services that's been offered for us, instant listening ship. So I think that radio has to come alive again eventually, because, a lot of people listen to the radio when they are in the cars, or I don't listen to radio. I haven't listened to radio for a very long time. So I don't stand by the fact. But yeah, when I commute, I listen to audiobooks or a podcast.
Well, there's definitely still a market for hearing people live, because you get people, they go live on YouTube, they go live on Facebook. So you can see a way that effectively radio, and it might end up being internet radio, but how radio and podcast could meld in that way, in that someone will do kind of like a live podcast episode, which is broadcast either on traditional radio or online, and then that becomes a podcast episode as well in its own right.
I was also thinking about this. You just mentioned live, and I was thinking like when I will move back to Latvia, to make like a live, like live at home sitting podcast and everything. But that a few days ago, I met one of my friends who is also doing audio and video engineering and editing. And he said that, why don't I try a podcast, which have been in my mind for a while, an idea, a live podcast on the street? Because he said that he have heard somewhere during the corona, since the people are not allowed to be inside closely together, there was some podcasters who started a podcast on the street. They just put the microphones on the street and people were just passing, events was happening. And then, they were still in the lawful things. So they were in distance and they were outside, because when being outside, it's less risk to being influenced by the virus. So I was thinking why don't they have an outdoor studio or an outdoor a live sessions, say every Wednesday there's in a certain location there is a live episode by Startup Playground podcast. So something like that along those lines.
Chris, I'd like to finish this conversation by looping back around to where we started. You mentioned how it's a very high proportion of startups fail and not many succeed. And I'm just wondering what's kind of led you to go down this path into entrepreneurship. Why? Okay, I understand that hospitality, you'd reached the end of the road on that and it wasn't for you. But why go down this particular path, which is, it's extremely difficult?
The reason why I basically went into entrepreneurship is, I would say the first start was that I wanted to challenge myself and see, because, all my life I've been kind of backing up a lot of things and, kind of dropping out a lot of things. And I realized that for once in my life, I would love to start doing something that I love and try loving it. And if you really love and if you really have passion for something, then, as I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, is that it doesn't feel like work. And you also have heard that one of my greatest and also, let's say, mentors that I cherished and followed for many years since I was a little guy and since the first iMac and Apple One came out, is referring right now to Steve Jobs. One of his most famous quotes that I will read right now is basically that your work is going to fill a large part of your life. And the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it, keep looking. Don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you will know when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as years roll on. So keep looking until you find it. Don't settle. What I would love to say by this is that basically I want to love something that I do. And I always, as I refer to myself, I always search for something. And I think that finally in my 29 years, I have finally found something that I love. And I have found something that inspires others through what I do. And if I can inspire one life and inspire one person to change for better, then that's all it matters for me.
If you found that thing at age 29, then you are doing extremely well, I think, because there's a lot of people certainly older than that and some people who never get there. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Elvis, this has been really interesting. You mentioned the Steve Jobs quote. Are there any other tools, resources, books, anything like that, which you found sort of particularly useful as you make this transition to entrepreneurship?
One of the other people that and some people have maybe a negative also thoughts about this person and also positive. It's mixed feelings. It's who I'm referring is Gary Vaynerchuk or Gary V. He comes from a Eastern world, which is like your Soviet Union times and everything. And I kind of create a connection to him because I also come from that kind of part of the world and also those living situations. And even though sometimes he may swear and say things that doesn't make sense to like most of the people, but he has his saying, and if he had built something out of nothing and raised money, he is a person to listen to because he made something out of something. Also recently I started listening to a lot of like Simon Sinek audiobook, The Why. And then also I'm listening lately to, and also of course I have listened to Crushing It by Gary Vaynerchuk. So that's like another resource that I'm closely referring to. And the last one, and it's been suggested by one of my business partners and dear friends, Martin Schiller, is Sell or Be Sold by Grant Cardone. And when I first started listening to that audiobook, it made me clear sense that, no matter what we do in life, if we go buy milk in a shop, or if you go buy relationships or a business or anything we do in life, either we sell something to somebody, either we've been sold something to us. And that's life principle that we have to learn to be better salespersons, and not like sales like selling, but actually it can get out of a lot of unnecessary conflict if we kind of learn how the sales. Those are kind of like one of the things that I'm referring to. And of course, like a lot of my grandparents that unfortunately they are dead. And also one of the books that's The Prince by Antoine Exupéry. Yeah, a lot of, like when you're growing up and then you start reading these kind of books, so like I'm referring Little Prince, is you start understanding what is actually, the true meaning of this book and what actually the writer or the person who wrote it wanted to mean it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for all of those. That's great. And where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Basically, I'm accessible in all the social media except TikTok. You can search me in Facebook under Elvis Metrins, LinkedIn, Elvis Metrins. Instagram is, you can write Elvis Metrins and it's going to appear like my a tag name, which is METRINS Metrins, like with soft letters. Podcast, Startup Playground podcast.buzzsprout.com. Basically in any social media, but mainly I'm in LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to contact with me, have a cup of coffee, or if he wants to hear about my journey or share his story or just learn something about me or learn about podcasting, then feel free to drop me a new connection invite, and I'll accept it and we can head it from there.
Brilliant. I will link to those in the show notes. Elvis, I'm really looking forward to seeing just where you are in a year's time. In the meantime, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Jeremy, very much for inviting me. I hope that people who will be listening to this will find value in what I say. Let's connect. Let's increase the community and help each other to impact the world.
Thank you very much, Elvis.
You're welcome, Jeremy. Bye-bye.
One of the things which really resonated with me with this interview is how Elvis had basically started a podcast on a subject area which interested him. He's not necessarily sure where it's going to go, but he's using the podcast as a medium to explore it, to find out where opportunities lie, to make connections with other people. And that's pretty much the reason why I started the podcast. As regular listeners will know, and certainly if you've read my About page, career change, and specifically changing my career, is something that's been on my mind for some time. And the way I decided to start exploring it was through the medium of this podcast, so that I could find out more information for myself about changing career and how hopefully other people could find that information and find it helpful. I didn't have a fixed idea as to where the podcast might take me, and certainly at the time of recording, I don't think Elvis necessarily knew for sure where the podcast might take him, but in both our cases, we're using it just as a means to explore an area which is of interest to us and see what doors it opens. And certainly in my case, it has opened doors. It has sparked in my mind ideas for what I might turn this into, or what I might do with it, or what directions it might lead. And I think sometimes that's just what we need to do, rather than just sitting and reading about something, going out and talking to people about it, making some content. I mean, it's dead easy these days. Pretty much anyone can do it. But if you're struggling to think about how you might explore a particular area, then it's a great place to start. You'll find show notes for this episode with links to where you can get hold of Elvis and the resources he mentioned. The show notes are at changeworklifecom/64 for episode 64. And I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I have a couple of exercises on my website which might help you out if you know that you do want to make a change, but you're just not really sure what kind of change is right for you or where to start. If you click on Find Career Happiness, you'll find that at the menu at the top of my website. That'll take you to a form where if you fill that in, I will send you a couple of exercises. One which helps you identify what sort of things you enjoy doing, what are your likes, what are your dislikes, what are you good at, and another one which helps you visualize what you actually want life to look like. So in 5 years' time, if someone was to ask you how things are and you say, great, couldn't be better, well, what would life look like to make you say that? It's an incredibly useful thought experiment. Certainly I found it incredibly useful when I first did it, and it really does help make decisions. Because when faced with a particular choice, do I do this job, do I do that job, what do I do, then you can look at this picture that you draw for yourself and think, well, is this opportunity, does this fit in with my picture, or is it going to help me get there? So do check out those exercises if you think it might be of interest. As I say, if you go to my website, changeworklife.com, the menu at the top, there is an item there, Find Career Happiness, and you will find the exercises there. We're already beginning to close in on the end of 2020, and wow, what a weird year it's been. But one thing that's not changing is that I've got another great interview coming next week, and I can't wait to see you then. Cheers. Bye.